All right, I'd like to kind of go over the stock market lab. What this lab is really about are these things right up here, which is this lab is all about analyzing data for linear regression. So I'm going to ask you to do 7 things. Now, it's hard for me to model because what you're really going to be doing is looking at 7 things and coming up with your own answers. And those 7 things are I want you to residual plot, the histogram, a scatter plot with best fit line. Okay, so you come up with the equation and you tell me, do you think this is the right thing, a best fit line? A look at outliers. What kind of outliers are they? Do they have leverage? Do you think you should remove them and look at the equation without those outliers? Look at the r squared without them. And then, of course, I also want you to look at the r and the r squared. Extrapolate, so use that equation to come up with some predictions for the future. And then just think about linking variables, which you can't really do looking at the data, but just to think about the situation. And if there's something else that's not there that's really causing both of those things to change. All right, so I will show you some things on this video to help you, but what I really want you to do is to look at each of these elements, analyze the data on your Excel spreadsheet, and then write a response to them about what you think once you get the actual numbers, all right? So the first thing is just a residual plot. We've done this a lot in this class. I think we have, at least. I hope so. And that's just using the data analysis tool, so just do it really quickly. We have regression, and while you're here, we're actually going to be looking at 3 things, so we might as well make all 3. We're going to be looking at residuals, the histogram, residual plot, line of best fit. You need to do your Y input. So here you actually have to think, what is the Y input? And in the case of pies, I'm looking at the pie example, Y is always your response variable, so that's responding. So the question is the thing that's responding, is it the price? So this would also be the dependent variable, or is it the number of pies sold? So is price causing the number of pies sold, affecting that? Or are the number of pies affecting price? For this scenario, I'm guessing that the price is affecting the number of pies. So my Y variable is the number of pies, and my X variable, which is my explanatory variable, is my price. And in this case, by the way, this is in pennies, so 600 is actually $6. All right, so I've got all this lined up. I'm going to put this on another regression worksheet, so I'll call this the pie regression. All right, awesome. So now ideally I've got this pie regression popping up any second now, I hope, on my computer, and then I can start answering those questions that I talked about. All right, so let me just neaten this up a little bit. So we have our residual plot. I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger so we can really look at it. On first look, it does over. It does, some people say like, oh, is there a pattern? Look, everything's here. There's just one variable there. So I have to ask, what do you think is happening with that one variable? Is it really showing a pattern, or is this maybe some kind of outlier? And then we just want to look at where most of the data is. And if you look at where most of the data is, it does not look like a pattern to me. So when you write your response in the cell for this one, please take note. Don't get fooled by one data point. And in thinking about that one data point, I might want to actually look at this graph right here, which is my line of best fit. Let me just move this out of the way so it confuses me. So if I remove these things here, what I can see on my line of best fit is, what do you know, there is this one crazy point way over here, okay? By the way, these red things are the line of best fit. They did them as points on a line. The blue is my actual data. All right, so this looks like what is explaining this weird pattern right here. So you kind of want to relate the two together. All right, so when you go to selling pies, you would ideally have some kind of little table right here where you can talk about number one and actually talk about what the residual plot shows you, okay? Which is basically, is the linear regression appropriate or not? So then we're going to go to number 2 and answer that, have a little discussion about the histogram. So for a histogram, you have to remember how to make a histogram. And so I'm going to do it super fast right here. For those of you who can't remember, if you can, just go ahead and skip ahead. The histogram is of our residuals. So our residuals are in the pie regression right here. And the residuals are all of these in yellow here, right, where it says residuals. So this tells you your predicted value, and this again is the number of pies sold, and this is what, how far off we were from that. That's our residual, our error when we actually put that best fit line in. So to find the histogram, we do the max, we do the min, we're going to do our bin, we're going to do our rounded bin, and then we're going to actually make the bins. Okay, awesome. So for max, it's just equal max, and you highlight that. For the min, equal min, again, you're going to highlight your residuals. And then for your bin range is always going to be the max minus the min divided by your number of bins. Now, if I don't tell you specifically, we just always say it's about 10, all right? So I reference my max minus my min, and I'm going to divide by 10. That gives me a pretty funky number. Now, we want to show data in a way that people can look at quickly and understand. If you've ever looked at the newspaper, Time Magazine, Newsweek, anything, you'll see that when they show graphs, they don't show numbers like 27, 43. The numbers are always in 5s or 10s, and I don't mean 5s like 105. I mean like 100 or 500. Really nice rounded numbers. So this number right here is funky. I am going to round it up to something that could be really easy to work with, which is 2,000. I think people can visualize that. Now I'm going to go to the bins. The first bin is going to be my rounded minimum. The rounded min is your minimum, which is right here, okay? And it's got to be something this or smaller. Now, the natural thing to say is, awesome, let's make it negative 10,000. But remember, with negative numbers, negative 10,000 is actually bigger than this. So I'm going to actually go for negative 11,000 because that is slightly smaller than my min. The next one is always the hardest one, the second one. And this one is where we click on the first cell and add the rounded bin range. Okay. So I'm going to say equals. I'm going to click on that first cell. So I'm always referencing the cell right above it. And I'm going to plus the rounded bin. Now, since I always want to be adding this exact same amount, I don't ever want it to change. I'm going to absolute reference that with dollar signs. Okay. And now I've done that cell. Now I just need to autofill just this cell. If I copy both of these, it's going to do some weird autofilling where it autofills 11,000, then 9, and adds to the 9. Just this one, I'm going to autofill until I capture my max. So I'm going to autofill until I see a number that is just slightly bigger than 85,000. So I'm guessing not there yet. All right, I made it. Okay, so now I can just go ahead and make my histogram through data analysis tool. So histogram, okay. Now here, thing to always remember, your input range is your data. Bins are not data. Your data are your residuals. That's what I wanted to graph to begin with. So I'm going to highlight my residual. Then I'm going to highlight my bins, which are right here, right from the top on down. Okay. I have to click on a chart output. I'm going to actually let the output range be right here. I'll just stick it right next to all the stuff I've got going on. I would only click labels if when I highlighted my bins and my actual data, I'd highlighted the label in front. So I'm not going to click that. All right, let's see how it looks. So here's this. More is at 0, which means I've captured all my data. Awesome. And my graph that's right here, looking so nice. So I'm just going to move this down so we can look at it a little bit better. As always, I'm going to delete that. Okay. I'm going to shrink that, which I'm not going to do right now, but I'm going to get rid of the gap. And, oh wait, I can't do it. Okay, so just going to get rid of that gap. I didn't do it, but and then I can analyze it. So once this gap is gone, I'm going to look at this. One thing I noticed right away is I do have some incredibly large residuals, just a couple right here in this negative area, and then right there. Most of my residuals, if I'm going to talk about this histogram, I would say most of my residuals are between about negative 1,000 and 5,000. That's where most of my data is. And then I have a couple extreme values, and I might try to figure out, I can sort this here and figure out what data is matching with these extreme values to see if that maybe affects this pattern up here and the residual plot. Okay, so when I do talk about it, I will talk about where most of my data is, and then where I see some extreme values, and if I have the time, I'll actually look and see if they match. My guess is that maybe one of these extreme values goes with one of my big outliers. Okay, all right, so now I would talk about my histogram shows, and you talk about this. And from here, we're ready to get into things that you're probably a bit more familiar with. I'm going to look at the scatter plot. What is the equation? So again, I can go right over here to that scatter plot. I can insert an equation and find it. I'm also going to look at it and see, does it look almost straight? Not really. Hard to tell. Big scatter. My guess is the R squared is super low, which here is the R squared, by the way. Turn that into a percent. And what do you know? It is incredibly small. So there really isn't a relationship here. So I would also talk about that when I got to number 4. When I got to number 5, look at that outlier, describe it. Do you think it's leveraged or influential? Then I'm going to extrapolate. I'm going to plug these values. That was actually just for the stock market, so I won't actually plug these in for the pie, but what I would like you to do for the pie one is to actually choose some prices and see for those prices what cells would you expect, and then just think about the scenario for lurking variables. All of this you're going to write down. So you're just kind of doing a full analysis. One thing to note is on the outlier part, if you do have an outlier, I recommend that you copy your data, put it onto a new sheet, and run a regression analysis again and delete that one point and see if that changes your R squared and how that changes your equation, if it changes it dramatically, and talk about that. All right, I hope that is helpful. You're going to be doing these 7 things for the selling pie and then also for your stock market data. If you do not have your own stock market data, I have included some that you can use. Thank you.